because there are, just looking at cannabis in isolation, there are so many known carcinogenic risks with it that I don't think that the Health Ministry or the Ministry of Health would want it to be legalised purely on that basis alone.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, what's your views on that, the whole legalisation of drugs?
I'd have to say what Ian's saying. I mean, I'd have to leave it down to the government to decide that, but at the same time, from what we know and from working with young people that are using cannabis and stuff like that, the effects of cannabis varies so differently in each individual. I think they would find it very hard to see it as something to legalise.
Yeah. Okay. Roger, turning to you, there's some people who say that getting involved in drugs also links to gangs and to violence and to crime as well. What do you think the link is there? I mean, we talked about before that joining gangs could potentially lead you to drugs. Do you think it's right the other way around as well? If you get involved in drugs, then you're more likely to get involved in crime?
No, I don't think if you're involved in drugs, you're more likely to be involved in a youth gang. I think if you're, you can get recruited to a youth gang for the whole simple purpose of running drugs. And that's why the age membership of youth gangs has come down to children at school below secondary age. And that's because they are used to run drugs for the older gang members. And that also gives them some money. And that's how you grow young people into drugs. Now, whether when you get into a gang, you start using drugs yourself, or you become a dealer eventually as you get older as an older gang member, there's that element as well, of course. So the drugs culture is for the heavy end street gangs. That's part of being a member of a street gang. As I said earlier on, it's a business. You're making money, making lots of money. John Pitts, who we spoke about earlier on, he estimated in one London borough, you're earning huge amounts of money per year, you know, 100,000 plus, easily. So there's real money to be involved. How you, but another point should be made is that most supermarkets now sell alcohol in cans, which is cheaper than bottled water.
Right, okay. So you're saying they have a responsibility as well, and
well,
there's people out there trying to make money out of it, right?
We get stuck on the other drugs. Alcohol is a major killer in this country, and you can buy it in supermarkets, you can buy it on corner shops, wherever, and you can buy it cheaper than bottles of water.
So why is it not treated in the same way as more traditional?
Well, maybe that's due to government policies. The taxation on alcohol is pretty important for any government. Drugs, well, there's drugs and drugs, and the whole stretch from from a puff to injecting or doing the line of coke or whatever it is. You know, there's a whole sort of raft of different drugs. Alcohol is alcohol. Okay, you've got spirits and beer and lagers, etc. But the government concern is, I still think, is with alcohol because it makes money.
Yeah. I
mean, they could do a lot of things about restricting access to alcohol. There's some discussion about raising the price and some people drinking, but it's the same as other drugs, you know? It's also about policing it as well. I was saying to Ian earlier on, most London boroughs now, you spend time in any street, you'll see someone running drugs.
Okay.
Now, policing is always, in my view, and the Met is about policing Mr. Big. You deal with the big guys. You leave the other stuff on the ground to the local teams who, quite frankly, haven't got the resources. We all see drug running going on the streets, and it's not being stopped. Okay.
All right, Ian, in terms of the actual police and the work they're doing, what are the initiatives at the moment to tackle drug use?
With regards to drugs, we operate a comprehensive intelligence network throughout the Met, filters up from information which we receive around dealers up centrally, and filters back down as well. And we act on that. We carry out observations. We have crime squads on all London boroughs. And if we see groups we believe to be dealing because of the area or the information, we'll stop and we'll search and we'll arrest if necessary.
Okay. Jason, do you think that these actual initiatives are working on street level? How are they actually influencing young people?
I think they probably are working, but to be fair, lack of resources, probably money, because obviously all of these things cost money as well. So I mean, it's going to be hard to police actually everything what's going on out there.
Okay. I mean, you work for Merton Council, so what kind of initiatives are they doing, and what kind of projects are they involved in?
We do joint work with an organisation called YAP, and they concentrate on drugs. So they go into schools with drug boxes and show young people what the drug boxes. For those who don't know what a drug box is basically they're artificially made things that look like real drugs. You would never know the difference.
Right.
And it shows all the implications. There's read-ups on it, so it tells you what the drugs do, what the effects are, and X, Y, Z, where they come from, just like things we've just touched on about not being pure and all the kind of different things that are put into these things. Skunk, for instance, there's all glass in there to make it way heavier and all these things these people are smoking. He talks about cigarettes. There's something like 4,000 different chemicals in one cigarette.
Yeah.
And even sometimes the cigarette's even more harmful than even some of these drugs that the young people are smoking. So it just educates the young people about the effects of drugs.
Okay. So I think something we've talked about here is education. I think what you're saying in terms of the police initiatives, education is key as well, and especially in Merton as well, the youth work they're doing. For the audience here, I mean, in terms of education, do you think there is enough happening in schools and universities for education on drug use? Have you got a point here?
Well, I think drugs plays a big part. Oh, it's linked to money as well.
Yeah.
I see every day after school, I see people selling drugs by myself from my eyes, and the person who's selling it, I think, to be honest, he's having problems at home,
right,
and he's having social problems, and like everyone got bills to pay at home as well.
Yeah, so they're under financial pressures.
Financial pressure as well. So that's why one thing I think they're selling drugs.
But in terms of, I mean, in terms of prevention, stopping people from buying drugs, do you think in your school, or are you at college at the moment?
I'm college.
Yeah, college. Do you think they're actually doing enough to educate you about the risks of why you shouldn't take drugs?
Well, they are, but there are no people, like, there's no one to stop them, are they? Well, look, say the government has got a police force to stop the drugs.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the government is selling drugs at the same time as well. Like tobacco, that's addiction. It's addictive.
Yeah, we just touched on that. Cigarettes are really dangerous and they're addictive as well.
And further on, if you keep smoking cigarettes, you'll further on go to cannabis, further on. And to be honest, I think it's all about money.
Okay, all right, that's a valid point. Let's get some more views here. Yeah, someone at the back.
I think you mentioned about the education within schools. I think it ends up being restricted to within the school, as long as people leave outside the school. I mean, there are examples famous for drugs being sold just outside the gate. So,
right, okay.
So actually, I think whatever happens outside, I think parents have to take responsibility for it. It's like antisocial behavior. If people get involved in gangs or any other violence, it really has to come down to families broken down. Fine, but then the government has to look for ways to solve it.
Okay, all right, let's get some more views. We've got some hands up here in the audience.
I would say the school does quite enough, because they can't just spend their whole time just explaining us.
Yeah.
It's actually our parents' problems as well, because they should teach us from the age of when
so education at home is just as important, you're saying?
So it's as important as the school is.
Cool. Okay, all right, fantastic, yeah. Mustafa, you got a point?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point about what Roger said about obviously there's a lot of people selling drugs and they're making a lot of money, but the point we should really address is how are the drugs actually getting into the country? Is that something that the government are they doing something about it? I mean, to stop people doing drugs, obviously, how are the drugs actually coming into the country?
That's a good point. I mean, what how much can you put this pressure on the government to actually stop drug abuse as well? What can people who are making legislation in Parliament, how can they actually affect what's happening on the street?
On the national police agencies, there's soccer, there are different, there's the UK Borders Agency, and again, the intelligence, and I'll speak to my friend there later on perhaps about what you told me earlier on, but yeah, that chain of information goes all the way to the highest international levels, and it's important to remember that much of these drugs are imported.
Right, okay.
So they have to come through ports, come through docks, come through small dinghies across the channel, and we're working with UK Borders Agency, Customs and Excise to intercept them at that level as well as locally. So this is a linked-in operation.
Okay, but is the government or the police not doing anything about it to try and stop this, or?
I'll just explain what's being done on a national level, and clearly there's influence over how much we can do locally.
Yeah, I think obviously it takes a while for it to filter down and for you to see maybe see the results of that. Roger, have you got something you'd like to add?
We shouldn't forget that part of growing up in Western countries for a young person is you experiment in all sorts of things, whether it's using alcohol, using drugs, whatever it is. You know, it's seen as a normal part of growing up. You experiment, whatever it is, or driving a car underage without a full driving licence, whatever it is, and that's not going to go away. That's part of growing up. Yeah. The issue is that governments and local authorities, youth services, the police, whoever, academics like me, can only suggest ideas. At the end of the day, it's down to the individual person. Having said that, that is very difficult for many, many young people, and always will be, because the opportunities are there. If you take away the opportunities, another opportunity will appear. Yeah. So that's, you know, it's without blaming the society we live in, it's there because it's business. One of those facts of life, it's making money. Yeah. People who use and sell drugs are entrepreneurs. I was saying, it's a business. If you tackle the business, well, you know, there's different factors come into play there.
All right, Ian, just if I could turn to you, we're just wrapping up now. In terms of the discussion we've had today, we've talked about gangs, we've talked about drugs as well. What would your advice be to people who are watching, young people out there who maybe are involved or maybe know people who are involved in gangs or drugs? How can they go about that? How can they actually
tackle the drug aspect of that one, if I may? There are plenty of advice services out there. There's Frank is a national scheme which the government have run. Contact your local authority. Every local authority will have local youth workers. Contact your school. If you have gotten involved, there are ways of getting out. If you haven't got involved, simply do not do so.
Okay, Jason, turning to you, what will be your final words to wrap up the discussion we've had today? We've got so many young people watching the programme. What would your advice be to them?
My advice to young people in terms of gangs, I would say to them that, you know, it's a mug's game, you know. Don't get yourself a criminal record, it's not worth it. It's going to have longer effects down the line. So I'll tell you on a whole, stand up for what you believe, be an individual, regardless of the majority, stand up for what you believe. Yeah. And in terms of the drugs, I would tell them, don't get involved in it in the beginning, no matter how small it is. Try not to experiment, you know, be healthy, go to the gym, enjoy your life.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Roger, any final words?
Very difficult. I think it's trying to keep an open mind. If you're a young person, it's to look at alternatives, to look at people, adults who are positive and give you an alternative view. That's part education. It's also about funding local projects to work with local people dealing with local issues. There are global things happening, like the importation of drugs, for example. Difficult to stop because, as Ian says, they're criminal gangs, it's a criminal business. It's the local areas where people working together, different agencies working together with local people and local organisations. That's the way to really tackle it at the local level. Okay.
All right, thanks a lot. I just want to thank all of our guests here for your participation today. And obviously for the audience as well, thanks for your input into the discussion. For people viewing at home as well, don't worry, you can also put in your views as well. We've got an email address, Twitter page, and also the official Real Talk site. The addresses are there for you at the bottom of the screen. I want to thank everyone who's been getting in touch already. We've had a fantastic response. On that site, don't forget you can watch previous programs. Also, if you want to be involved in the program, maybe you want to be here in the audience for the next show as well, there's ways to get in touch there as well. So thanks again for today. I hope you can join me next time for more Real Talk.